I think it's important to bring resources and new people to communities, but in that nature, in that vein of asset-based community development, to recognize the people and passions that are within our neighborhoods as assets. So I think, yes, we're here to bring a certain resource or mindset, but that resource and mindset has to have the approach of bolstering what's here, and of taking advantage of and leveraging the people who are here and cultivating growth from within.
Welcome to the NeighborLink podcast. I am here with Réna Bradley of Bridge of Grace, and thank you for being on this episode. Bridge of Grace is an organization here on the southeast side who has decided to plant its roots and to grow and to flourish and be a part of the neighborhood. And there's a lot of attention and a lot of conversation around Bridge of Grace as being kind of a forefront leader in terms of engaging and staking a claim in a neighborhood. And so I want to have that conversation today. So welcome to NeighborLink podcast.
Thanks for having me, Andrew.
Tell us about yourself. Like, we want to know who Réna Bradley is. We hear about Javier, but we don't know Réna.
Oh my goodness. So Réna Bradley is the youngest of 5 girls. I grew up in Southfield, Michigan. My parents were business owners, small business owners, and I lived in a very stable suburban neighborhood and had that life. And it was awesome because Southfield is a gem in that when I grew up there in the 90s, there were a lot of, it's predominantly middle class and predominantly Afro-American, our neighborhood. So I had neighbors who were lawyers and doctors and judges and nurses and teachers, and they looked like me.
Yeah.
And I had friends who were in honors classes, and they looked like me. And all our parents were there, like, rooting us on and saying, my kid's awesome, your kid's awesome. Oh, Raina's going to be a doctor when she grows up. Raina's going to be a lawyer when she grows up. Raina's going to be a judge when she grows up. And then there was my mom there saying, my kid's going to be president when she grows up. So it was beautiful. It was high standards, really encouraging, really nurturing, awesome environment.
How did you end up in Fort Wayne then?
So when I was in high school, I decided that I wanted to be an architect. And it was because...
You didn't want to follow the presidential candidacy route? Or are you still working on that? Is Mom still pushing towards that?
I'm on it. I'm getting there, Mom.
I can see it.
I'm getting there, Mom. But I felt like there were 3 choices growing up, that I could be an engineer or a doctor or a lawyer, and like that's what success was in the school that I went to and kind of the Detroit environment. And so I started trying those things because that's my nature. I like to test different areas, and I went up to my high school's anatomy lab because we had one of those, and I decided that cats on formaldehyde were really gross.
Yeah.
And that maybe I didn't want to be a doctor. I took debate as like my delving into law a little bit, and I loved the learning and the camaraderie, but the kind of cutthroat nature of it wasn't as fun to me. I was like, maybe not that, so I was settling on engineering. But I loved being creative. I loved drawing, I loved ceramics, painting. I thought about fashion for a while. And so I started leaning toward, I was like, I still want to be a creative, but fine artist didn't feel like a guaranteed, comfortable life. And I took an AP environment class. Shout out to Mr. Minton.
All right.
And he made it practical. He told us how much energy buildings consume. He told us how much pollution they put out.
Wow.
And he did something one day where he said, okay guys, so how many of you guys in here have lung disease? Who has asthma? Who has bronchitis? And it was like a third of our classroom.
Wow.
And he said that's because of the pollution that our auto factories are putting out in our environment. And he asked us, hey, what color's the sky? And we're all like 16, so this feels like a really goofy question.
Yeah.
We're all like, is there a trick? And he's like, no, okay, what color is the sky? Blue? And he said, is it though? And he walked us outside and we looked at the sky and it wasn't super blue. And we hadn't really noticed that before. And so that brought it home to me, like, wow, if I dive into architecture, I can still be a creative, but perhaps I can, make our environment better. And that'll improve people's health. And that'll be something that's meaningful to us as a community. So that's why I decided to study architecture. Went to school in DC. Auto industry collapse happened before I graduated. So I stayed in DC, worked on large hospitals, got an awesome opportunity to go back home, work for the Detroit Land Bank Authority, and do neighborhood revitalization and improvement with green energy technologies, which was way cool. And then a certain bankruptcy happened at the city of Detroit. And I gave myself a nice long vacation, saw the world for a while, and tried to find an opportunity that melded those interests of being a designer, but still of doing something meaningful for people in a community. And I happened upon Bridge of Grace through an e-blast from CCDA, from the Christian Community Development Association. And I thought the organization sounded really cool. They wanted an education programs coordinator. And I was like, that's totally not what they need. And so I scheduled an interview and kind of told them that, hey, I'm an architect. I think what you guys are doing is really great, talking about shifting culture and whatnot. And Javier always talks about tipping point and broken windows theory. And I saw that on his testimonial. And I said, so because I feel like you understand tipping point and broken windows theory, I think you know how much your environment can impact your culture and your people. And if you would like to do that type of work, I'd really love to do that type of work with you. And his face lit up like it was Christmas. And so it took about a year for me ultimately to land here after that first conversation. But that is how I came to be in Fort Wayne.
Describe this particular neighborhood from a socioeconomic. It sounds like from where you grew up, you've chosen education. You had a supportive family, a supportive neighborhood, in a community. How did you get exposed to like even CCDA or more community development minded stuff?
So I think my mind was always more on community. I think that's just my heart. My dad and I used to go on walks together, and I started carrying a plastic bag because I wanted to pick up bottles during our walk. And I used to go for runs because I was on the track team, and one day I came home with a trunk full of plastic. That was just my nature. I think I've always been more community-minded. CCDA in particular, a friend happened to invite me to a CCDA event in Michigan. She's also a Christian woman in the community development sector, and she's like, I feel like this would be right up your alley. You should totally come with me to this meeting. So I went with her. But this neighborhood, socioeconomically, our median income is around $25,000 per household, and that can be for a family of one or a household of one where you have like a single retiree living there, or it can be a household of up to 5 or 7 or so, a couple adults and several children.
Median household income for Fort Wayne is about $48,000. So gives the audience a bit of context.
Right. So it's about half of that, and it puts most of the families in our neighborhood under or right at the poverty line. But outside of the social economic characteristics, it's a very loving, welcoming, incredibly warm place. And I think that's the difference, where even though I grew up in a nurturing environment with a lot of middle-class folks, I knew the neighbors across the street from me and on either side, and that was pretty much it for the full 18 years that I grew up in that household. Here, I wave to everybody who drives by. They're very friendly. The kids all come out and hug everybody. And my neighbors will check on me. They'll knock on my door. They'll make sure I'm all right. When I first moved in, I moved into this yellow house right across from us. And I had a neighbor who was living at this house. There's other neighbors there right now who are also awesome neighbors. And I gave her the old fire pit out of my yard because I didn't foresee myself using it. And she told me, oh my gosh, my husband works for the bread factory. We're going to bring you bread. And I was like, you don't have to worry about bread. But she showed up at my house the next day with like 4 loaves of bread for a single woman, And so I put 3 loaves in the freezer, 1 in the fridge, like, okay, I have bread for a year. And she came back the next day and said, Raina, we have more bread for you.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like, okay, Brandy, I opened the door. She's like, you need to bring your car. I was like, bring my car? This playground wasn't here, so I was just going to walk over to her house. And she filled my trunk in some of the back seat with snickerdoodles and bagels and brownies. And, it was just this outpouring of love. And then I got to spread that. I was Santa Claus with bagels. I was just
Sure.
carrying them around to meetings and giving snickerdoodles away, aunts, uncles, whoever. I made friends with people really fast that way. But I just say that to say our neighbors are so just loving and caring. And the second they see that someone else cares or is warm and welcoming and friendly, they reciprocate, and I feel like we all build upon that as a community. And I think that's what makes our neighborhood super special.
And it sounds like you experienced that kind of right as you were moving in, more than just as a function of your job or your intentionality. Sure, you've developed from when you were a kid you're moving towards community development, you're being more intentional, but it sounds like that was neighbors being intentional with you at an early point.
Yeah, I think it's just our neighbors being themselves.
Yeah. We're sitting on a corner lot that you have designed and developed along with some students and kids in the community, which is great. And it's about 9:30 in the morning, and it's just really quiet and peaceful.
Yeah.
And I find that to be true. And many of our lower income neighborhoods in Fort Wayne, one, I think because we're more of a rural community in the way it was developed, that we don't have a dense urban core as much as some other cities. Is this kind of the feel on most mornings around here?
Yeah. It's pretty typical. There's the rush to get to school because Levon Scott is right over here. So you see all the kids walking by, and then that happens in several shifts. So the high school bus stop is nearby, the middle school bus stop is nearby. But it's pretty standard to just see parents walking their schools, waving, and after that, it's pretty quiet up until about 3.
Okay. Well, tell me about Bridge of Grace as an organization.
Sure.
You're a nonprofit organization connected to and birthed out of a local church here. Tell us a little bit more about the program and the organization.
Sure. So Bridge of Grace started in 2012, I believe was our official founding. And we focus on the comprehensive revitalization of the Mount Vernon Park neighborhood specifically, but with the goal for replication, that we want to create a model or framework that other communities can replicate to galvanize and energize and mobilize their neighbors to do good work in their communities. So it's our goal to help facilitate our neighbors becoming basically the engines or the catalyst for the change that they want to see in their own community. What we notice, or what we espouse, what we believe, is that our neighbors, everybody wants the same things. You want to have a safe community for your kids. You want to have excellent school systems. You want to feel safe. You want it to be beautiful. But I think it's very easy to feel as an individual that it's too much for any one person to take on.
Sure.
So we just try to listen to our community, figure out what our current priorities are, by figuring out what their current priorities are. I say our because most of us live in the neighborhood too. And then help shape strategies and find resources to get those things done. So that's our focus. And we try to do that with an asset-based approach, which I feel like some people see as noticing everything that's good and building upon everything that's good, but it's also just being willing to see the opportunities that are inherent in our challenges. I feel like some people look at vacant lots and they just see it as a blighting influence, but you don't see it as an opportunity to build amenities and bring people together. Some people see trash on their neighborhoods and you say, okay, we should do trash pickup. But are you also seeing that that's an opportunity to get folks together, to build relationships, to know each other, and to accomplish something together? Same thing with blighted houses. That can be a new home. You can mitigate the blight, you can board it up, or it can be a new home for a family. It can be a new meeting point for devotionals and whatnot. So there's all this opportunity inherent in what some folks only see as challenges. And I think that's a gift that I received as a designer. We're taught to look that way, to problem seek, and to then problem solve. Idle teenagers, people, teens are just running around. They can be designers.
Yeah.
They can get out here, they can figure out what our parks need to be, and they can build it themselves. So that, I feel like, is Bridge of Grace in a nutshell for me. We're just here trying to spread the love of Christ and help our neighbors create the neighborhood that they want to live in.
Sounds like many of the programs, or all the programs in the activity, have a human connectivity point as the driving force. Like rather than just a program that tries to transform something tangibly or physically, the programs are designed to connect neighbors to do the transforming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you see that in our holiday give back program. That's one that we really enjoy as a community, where we had a neighbor, a community neighbor, we'll say, who reached out to us and said, hey, you know, we really would love to sponsor a family in your neighborhood for Christmas, or a few families, because they had a surplus and they very giving people. And, you know, Javier and I both hesitated toward that because we were just like, you know, it doesn't feel comfortable to knock on anyone's door and say, hey, guys, you know, you look a little needy this year.
Yeah.
Can these folks help you out?
Yeah.
So instead, we brainstormed with the folks in that organization and came up with the idea of doing a give back, providing our community with an opportunity to create something and brighten someone else's Christmas season. So they donated fleece to us, and we made hats and blankets and scarves for local homeless men and women in Fort Wayne. We invited the community to join us in that effort to do something for someone else. And the first year we did it, it was amazing. I called maybe 8 to 10 households and said, hey, we're going to do something for homeless men and women for Christmas. Will you come out with us?
Yeah.
Will you come join us? And 100% of the families we called showed up.
Yeah.
And brought canned goods and all kinds of gifts or made cards for those men and women in Fort Wayne. And I think it just goes to show the heart of this community.
Sure.
You know, as soon as people felt like, oh, there's a way I can plug in, there's something I can do. If I can donate just canned goods and tie a knot, I can do something else for somebody else. And they came out and drove to do that. Other examples, I mentioned our teens. We have a design camp where our teens come out, they hang out with me for 5 weeks, and we walk them through the whole design process. So they identify community concern, design a solution to address that concern, build a full-scale working prototype of whatever they designed. I drag them with me to, I don't have to drag hard, to Board of Zoning Appeals hearings, and they testify on behalf of their own work, you know, to get it done. But again, that's seeing a challenge, a few challenges, maybe vacant lots, idle teenagers, a certain lack of access to creative, you know, outlets and schools, and just combining them all to create solutions like this one and the other 2 parks that are going on. So absolutely, we love to have that human interface. We think it's essential to our work. And ultimately, we try to grow leaders through those processes and give the community more and more and more ownership of the process as we go about it.
What are some of the, is there a particular story from, like, say, one of the teens in the design process that stands out to you in terms of new learning, or seeing them in the last year do something different after that kind of 5-week program?
Wow.
Or just how you've seen maybe a personality change from when you maybe first met them to when they went through the program?
Sure. And I don't want to say it's a personality change even. I just want to, I think the youth that I've met in this neighborhood and through that program are just brilliant.
Yeah.
They're brilliant kids. I think some of them may not realize quite how brilliant they are, but they're phenomenal. Xaviana is a phenomenal young lady. She's very subdued in effect, you know, so she doesn't seem to get very excited or anything. And I remember feeling like, okay, she's a little reserved. I'm not sure if she's happy, to be here. And I think she had just moved into the community when we first started our camp this past summer. And she was one where I think it was our last week of camp. So the end of our 5 weeks, I finally got her to pick up an impact drill. And she put a few pieces together, you know, got a few screws in there, where before she was just kind of holding lumber for other people to take care of it. And she looked up and just said, I'm a builder. I built that. Yeah. You know? And hey guys, we're making our dreams come to reality right now.
Yeah.
Right now. You know, and so it was never like this, whoa, all of a sudden Xaviana shouted from the rooftops.
Right.
But
for
you
her.
saw that pride of, I did that. We're
Yeah.
bringing our dreams to fruition, and that's something that we can do.
Yeah.
And like that, it was super powerful for me. One of my kids, after after I think the previous summer, he wrote me an email. It was just like, "Hey, Miss Raina, I'm interested in organizing a political rally. Do you have friends that could help me do that?" And I was
All
like,
right.
"Absolutely." I think they just know that I support their dreams.
Yeah.
I support their vision. If there's something you want to do and you're willing to do it, I'm here for it. And that's the growth, I suppose, I've seen in our kids. I've seen them feel like they feel like. I think them go from feeling like some of their dreams might be pipe dreams or just good ideas
Sure.
to things that they can actually do and take
Yeah.
on.
It's important. Shifting from holding a board to like putting some screws in.
Yeah.
Just the progression.
Yeah.
It's great. There's a couple of things around the Bridge of Grace that I think are significant that may not get talked about as much in terms of what may be more significant of why I think this is different than what we've seen some other things. One is the role of geography. Like,
Sure.
the fact that you guys have said Mount Vernon Park and have drawn a particular relatively tight boundary around a specific area. Can you talk about the role of geography or why like you draw a line around a particular area
Sure.
rather than saying like a whole quadrant or a whole like area of the city?
Right. And so that role of geography is really a role of scope.
Yeah.
It's limiting your scope so that you can work well within a set boundary. I believe Mount Vernon Park became our neighborhood more or less because that's where the church
Sure.
is. Javier came here to plant a church, and so he decided to start in his own backyard,
Yep.
essentially, which is smart.
The best place to start.
Exactly. And so when he first came out here, it predates me, he mobilized a group of volunteers to knock on all the doors in this community to say, what do you want to see in your church and what do you want to see happen in your neighborhood, and got their feedback. But I think having that scope is so important because we all have limited resources. We all have limited capacity as organizations and as people. And when you start to get larger than a single neighborhood, all of a sudden you have different folks with different needs and different perspectives.
Yeah.
The needs of Mount Vernon Park are not going to be the same as the needs of Pettit Rudisill or of Oxford. We all have different concerns and desires. Some of us have schools in our neighborhood, some of us don't. Some need infrastructure improvement,
Yep.
some need, more job creation. It's going to vary, but when you pick one neighborhood, you can focus on the concerns of that specific neighborhood and you can make strides with that specific neighborhood and that group of neighbors in a way that's meaningful and impactful, where if we try to spread out, I think, our resources across all of the Southeast Quadrant, one, there's no way we could address every single person's needs, but two, I don't think, like, having that dispersed impact, maybe we could plant tulips all over Southeast, maybe,
Sure.
but
Yeah.
we couldn't do the meaningful, impactful work that we do here, which is, the housing renovations, the park activations, so on and so forth. Second, we could try, maybe if we had like 200 employees, to live all throughout Southeast, but we can all live in this neighborhood and know our neighbors and know their concerns and have them be our concerns and have that vested interest in this community. So I think it is important to limit your reach just because you can maximize your impact. You can test it, you can pilot, you can figure it out, you can do it well, and then you can share with other people those resources and those lessons learned so that they can replicate similar efforts in their own communities, but in other communities where they are embedded and where they understand the specific concerns and needs of those neighbors. But no, having a smaller scope just really, I think, helps us to have impactful work.
Yeah, that's great. That's really important. I think one of the unique aspects about Fort Wayne is we have really relatively small neighborhoods. We have a lot of neighborhoods in our city, and they're smaller in scale compared to the way maybe other cities classify their neighborhood areas. But even in a neighborhood like this, how many households are here?
550.
So there's 550 households, relatively of the same kind of condition, in general, wide variety, but when you look at you bring in the socioeconomics and you look at that and you look at the geography, and if somebody came in and put $2 million and said we want to fix up all the houses, that's not even going to get, it will help a lot, but it's not going to solve all the problems. And so if you get too far and too big and say you want to change housing in the Southeast or a particular broader, to your point, like, can you really make as big of an impact?
Yeah.
And so getting focused and being able to see the progression of things is really important.
To see the progression and also to know the people.
Yeah.
I think we're very big about having a grassroots approach, but also a very personal and spiritual approach. We want to know you. We want to know, okay, if you haven't had a job in a little while, what's going on? Can we pray with you? Do you know that somebody cares about you? And to see the impact of just people knowing that someone cares is tremendous, When we did one of our first rounds of neighborhood surveys, we gave people a quiz about the neighborhood and then, told them the real answers to their questions, which I think helped shift perception. So, for example, a lot of people thought crime in our neighborhood was going up. And then you saw them look at the key to the quiz and everybody crossed it out and wrote dramatically decreasing. But we had our final question was, what surprised you the most? And I thought I was going to hear the number of kids in the neighborhood or the crime level in the neighborhood. And we got a couple of those, but the most consistent response was that you care, that someone cares, that someone's here to make a difference. And I think limiting our scope also helps us just be able to impart that to people. That when you drive past Rena's house, she'll wave at you. When you see Pastor Javier out looking around, that he's up to something good. He's still up to something, but he's up to something good. And that we have one another's best interests in mind.
One of the second thoughts, and we're heading in that direction, that I have that I think is unique about Bridge of Grace is that Javier, yourself, and other staff members of Bridge of Grace have chosen to live here. Talk about the role and the importance of being a neighbor with your work. Because most of social services or most of volunteerism or generosity or benevolence in a transactional nature, like there's lots of things to do in your neighborhood. And the way that most of us experience serving or engagement and community-related issues is that we leave where we live and we go into another community. We do whatever it is, whether it's tutoring students or working in this lot or mowing somebody's grass, and then we return home. And maybe we make a year or two commitment, but we're always leaving and coming, leaving and coming. Talk to me about the role and the importance, at least from a staff perspective, of living intentionally in the neighborhood that you're trying to do work.
I mean, I think the obvious thing is a couple of things I've mentioned. One, you have a vested interest in that community when it's not somebody else's, it's your community too.
You live here.
Yeah, you live here. So when the trash doesn't get picked up, it's not a surprise to you. You don't have to survey to figure out or say, just call me. You experience it. These things happen.
When crime happens, you experience it as well.
Exactly. You experience that as well. When celebratory things happen,
Absolutely.
You experience that as well.
When you connect and you're nice to your neighbor, you get the benefits of
still seeing those great, awesome people. Absolutely. But I think also, with Bridge of Grace in particular, a lot of our staff that are here, myself included, feel that we were called to this neighborhood. So it's not just a job, it's our mission. We feel that we are on mission here. And I feel like people can perhaps relate to that. There's a difference between a day of service and going out and being in a missionary role and living in your mission field. So when I first interviewed here, they said, would you pray about living in the neighborhood? Would you consider that? And I did, and I absolutely felt like God said, that's it. That's the place for you. And so I came. Javier obviously was called here as a pastor, and some of our other coworkers said the same. They just felt called here and they wanted to be here. A family that moved into one of our homes moved here from California, of all places, and said, I felt like God was just calling us to this neighborhood. And then we met Javier, and then, our house came to be. So it's a real discipleship missionary process. And I feel like, you can't make as great an impact if you're not living in the community. You can't minister to an area if you're as well. You can do something, but those informal moments, those kind of accidental collisions just can't happen if you're not in the neighborhood. I've been late to work some mornings because my neighbor pulled up and just said, "Oh, Raina, my husband's in the hospital. Can you just pray with me like right now?" Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, or coming out of the church one day, this young lady was coming out and just saying, "Did you just come out of the church? Can you pray with me? Because we need so this and that and the other." And absolutely. Or I walk around and I hear 5 kids, "That's the lady from the church."
Yeah.
It just, when you're, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, I feel like I feel it in my heart and I just want to take that out and give it to you. But when it's missionary, when it's more evangelizing, when you feel called because you're here for the purpose,
Yeah.
nothing else can come close to doing that, to serving on your mission field, to being and living in your mission field. So I do encourage people, if you feel called to a specific area and to a specific group of people, go move.
Yeah.
Go move. If that's your purpose, God he'll make it work.
Yeah, I'm curious. So I had an opportunity to speak at a different thing this past weekend, and it was on low income and just the vulnerable in a healthcare setting, and it was a really great conversation. And someone towards the end, we were doing a panel with the presenters and talking about, okay, how do we change these things? And for me, so much of what I've been learning, my wife and I felt called and moved into a particular neighborhood over a decade ago in order to be present and live where we were spending a lot of our time, and that whole idea as well. And as I learned about community development, Christian community development, and the whole idea of like what some of our neighborhoods need is this idea of radical, it's almost a radical relocation and redistribution of those of us that have resources. Like, our neighborhoods need more people of resource moving into them, because if you have resources, you got those resources from hard work and dedication and education and stable families, and we need to bring that to the community in order to diversify the neighborhoods a little bit. While that makes sense to you and I because of how we embrace and have learned about our faith, for those that may not have a faith background, how have you talked, or have you seen others that may not have a calling and a desire to step out into faith and like that? Like, how does somebody that may not have a faith also embrace that? Or is it more challenging, or are you seeing that happen? And what kind of encouragement do you have?
I guess I have a very sincere belief that everyone has a calling and purpose.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think they feel that.
Yeah.
Whenever you ask someone what their dream is, or what they're excited about, or what their passion is, there's an answer.
Yeah.
Right? The question is usually whether or not they're pursuing that dream and passion and answer. I feel that that's God-given.
Yeah.
Some people might feel like it's universe-given, or just something that's innate in of themselves, and I don't want to knock any of those ways of looking at it. I just look at it from a perspective of Christianity. And I feel like everyone, like I said, they have that calling and purpose, so it's just, are you going to live it out?
Yeah.
Or are you going to perceive it as a pipe dream? Are you going to be the person who holds the lumber, or are you going to be the person who puts those screws in? So I feel that's the choice, really. The choice is to live out your purpose. Now, can that mean missing some elements of comfort as you currently perceive comfort? Sure. But can it look like gaining a whole lot of fulfillment and satisfaction from your life and what you do and feeling meaning? Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think necessarily that anyone should force themselves into that role, though. I do want to emphasize that. Don't say, oh, well, because, Andrew's doing this, then that's what I have to do.
Right.
We're one body, which means that we're all a different part of that body. And, don't be a head that's trying to be a toe, or but just embrace your role, embrace your passion, embrace who it is that you are, and get out there and do it. I do want to emphasize also, I think it's important to bring resources and new people to communities, but in that nature, in that vein of asset-based community development, to recognize the people and passions that are within our neighborhoods as assets. So I think, yes, we're here to bring a certain resource or mindset, but that resource and mindset has to have the approach of bolstering what's here. and of taking advantage of and leveraging the people who are here and cultivating growth from within as well. Because one of the things that keeps me up at night is that fear that, oh my goodness, I would never want our work to displace our neighbors. They're beautiful. I feel, so special, but they are, special people who deserve every good thing that this world has to offer them. And I think that's the trick. It's figuring out how to be a rising tide that everybody can benefit from.
Yeah, it's good. It's a good reminder on the relational aspect of relocation and the ideas around that. So one of the challenges for myself, and what do you do for yourself? Because this kind of work, and when you live and you do this work every day, work-life integration is more the essence, and you illustrated that a few times of like, I'm leaving church and now I'm like, always on work, at work.
In a way.
Ultimately it's because it's who you are, living it out no matter where you're at. And so if you're adding value to the community, that people recognize it and approach you on that. What are some of the things that Réna does for rest and renewal and kind of disconnecting at times from always being on? Being a neighbor. We all do that, whether you grew up here or whatever.
Doing that. I usually just keep working. I don't recommend that. But I love what I do. I love what I do. Spending time with the kids gives me energy. Being out in our neighborhood and stuccoing tires for our latest park kind of gives me energy. I find that relaxing. You're just you and the stucco. But out there taking care of it, weeding my lawn, kids will run up, I want to weed too. Okay, let's do it. So I like that though. I like that kids will knock on my door and ask me to draw something, because I feel like it pulls me out of maybe the day-to-day menial work, you know what I mean? Like Absolutely. Of the paperwork mindset and of sitting there and
we
still
all need to push screws in boards, Réna.
Yeah,
so
or
we have
pick
to get
up a brush.
hands-on,
Pick up a brush, bake, a frozen pizza with some child. That's joyous, and I feel like sometimes the folks knocking on my door or asking me to pray, it pulls me out of just the mechanical nature of the work and more into the relational nature of the work, which is awesome. But lately, this summer, I've made an effort to be intentional in doing those things that give me energy as much as I'm intentional about doing those things that build up our neighborhood. So I guess that's looked like kayaking with my friends. So I've invited nearly all of my friends to come kayak with me this summer. And we've gotten out, we've done that. It's not sitting and eating dinner and getting fatter together. We're out doing something healthy and having good conversation. But that also gets me outdoors and into nature and onto water, which are all things that refresh me personally. And I create, I draw, I paint, I build stuff. And, I've been doing family portraits of my family and family members lately. So it's like if I get home and it's late, I can still pick up a pastel or a brush for a little bit and just, touch up my sister's ear or something. And that's an incredible release for me. So just honestly taking full advantage of nice weather and putting things on my calendar that mandates you will have fun from this time to this time. Because I think it's super easy to see recharging and refreshment as something that you earn and that you do after your work is done. But work is never done. And especially when you live in the community, there's always something that can be a little better, that can be touched up. And frankly, that will be there tomorrow. But one pastor, Pastor Joe from Fellowship Missionary, told me, he said, when God made the heavens and the earth, he made it in 7 days. And he made man on the 6th day. And then he, gave man his charge and said, okay, you're going to be a steward and so on and so forth. And you're going to rest on the 7th day. And he said, so he gave him his charge to work, and the next day was his day of rest. So he had him work from a place of rest, not to earn his rest. And so I've tried to adopt that standpoint of you need to work from rest. You need to give yourself rest and energy before you get out there so that you can give it your all. rather than feeling like you have to earn it, which I think is more my natural
Yeah.
my natural tendency.
Yeah, from myself as well. It always feels like I'm always on, which I love. I think if anything, mirroring and marrying your life and vocation and purpose all together brings you joy and balance more so than anything else.
Yeah.
Personally, from my experience as well. What are some exciting things going on at Bridge of Grace? What's the exciting things looking into the next year or so? Some projects.
Next Saturday, September 21st, we are going to be having a ribbon cutting for one of our new parks. So I mentioned our teens design parks for the neighborhood. In the Smith Street lot, they designed a stage with an undulating tire wall that's going to act as seating. So we're going to have a new performing arts space, and the Fort Wayne Ballet is going to send a couple members out to dance on the stage for the ribbon cutting. And we're going to be unveiling a mural that was done by some youth over at University of St. Francis for that lot. Directly following that, we're going to have a multicultural community festival. So we're going to have music from different cultural groups, food from different cultural groups, and the whole idea is to just pull out our community members to be one community. A lot of us live in proximity to each other, but we don't always get a chance to talk to our neighbors from different dialects or backgrounds, or to break bread with one another. Yeah. So we want to do that, and we're doing it as a pilot. We'd love to see, what if there was an international festival in this part of town?
Yeah.
Once a month or every other week, during the summer, and to highlight the economic potential of that area, to make it a market, so somebody can come and sell their pies or sell their body scrubs, or begin to launch those businesses in that entrepreneurial mindset. So we're really, really excited about that. I think that's the biggest thing we have coming up right now. Javier and I are going to be speaking at a few events. People see us all the time, I'm sure. So we'll see you if you come out to the Regional Neighborhood Network Conference, or the Reclaiming Vacant Properties Conference, or the AARP's Quality of Life Conference.
That's great.
Soon, yeah.
Well, we'll post some pictures of this with your podcast so people can see if they want to see what's going on and see the great work you're doing.
Perfect.
To wrap up, Réna, what does it mean to be a good neighbor?
I feel like I should have a one-sentence canned response to this, right? Being a good neighbor is just looking like treating people the way you would want them to treat your own family member. To look at that neighbor who's a little older than you as your aunt. To look at the children in the neighborhood as your own children, or as your nephews and nieces, and to respond accordingly. I think when we realize that we're just one big family, that we tend to give each other a little more love and a little more grace, and what community couldn't benefit from a little more love.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on the NeighborLink podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you for the work you do, and you pursuing the calling that you so passionately talk about, and keep telling that story, because I think our community in Fort Wayne needs to hear that story more than ever. Aligning your calling and your purpose towards the places that you live and how you do life and the way you work, and all of those things need to be more integrated and played out. So
yeah.